Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our unit on China. This week, we're covering 5,000 years nearly of China, and it begins with the Neolithic period with a few objects that will look a little bit familiar to you. It will bring you back to our study of the Neolithic in Southeast Asia and South Asia. And we'll move pretty quickly into the earliest civilizations, river valley civilizations, the Shang dynasty that forms along the Yellow River. We talked very briefly about that back when we were discussing river valley civilizations in relation to the Indus Valley civilization. And indeed, the time periods are not too distant. The Shang dynasty is right around the time of the Indus Valley. Now, that's just to kind of help you orient you in the really big picture of our class. We'll continue on all the way up to the 3rd century BC, to the Han Dynasty. Unlike our study of India and South Asia, there's quite a lot of continuity culturally in China, beginning with the Neolithic. There isn't a major civilization that appears and then disappears, a new culture entering in and introducing very different ways of thinking about the world and engaging. All the material that you learned in our unit on South and Southeast Asia. What we're going to find that's very exciting about China is that we see a really fascinating continuity visually across its visual culture, really beginning with the Neolithic. But that's just one piece of this module, and it's the bulk of this series of lectures. We'll be looking at visual culture, sculpture, particularly bronze work of the Shang and Zhou dynasty, as well as jade. The other piece of our module, and we are a humanities class, not an art history class, although this class is looking a lot at the arts, is to introduce you to two foundational beliefs and perspectives, and even worldview from a social and environmental perspective, to say nothing of spiritual, of Taoism and Confucianism. Taoism and Confucianism are pillars of Chinese culture. And this week, you're introduced to both of them in subsequent pages with, I think, very clear videos and reading. And we'll be going over these beliefs and how they formed and how they change depending on where they travel and at what time period they're being engaged as we progress in this class, all the way into Japan and Korea. Certainly Confucianism is very important in Korea and also in Japan. Now, the other piece to keep in mind as we're working with this material is next week, you've been studying the Silk Road as it's been brought to life through wonderful contemporary musical efforts through the Silk Road Ensemble in the discussion assignment. And thank you for some of you already posted wonderful discussion posts, so fantastic. But the Silk Road is linked to the Han Dynasty, which is where this module ends. It is the Han Dynasty that opens up China for trade and leads to an influx of new culture, new objects coming into China at a degree and speed that was quite different than previous times. And among these great elements of culture is the religion of Buddhism that comes into China, and we'll be looking at that next week in detail. So the studies that we spent so much time on a few weeks ago will be essentially refracted through our studies this week. And we'll be looking at what happens to Buddhism when it moves into a world suffused with the ideas of Taoism and Confucian thought. So that's the very, very big picture. Now, the rest of this video will focus on the diverse geography of China. And then I will end, and then the following video will look at Neolithic, and then the next will look at the Zhou and Shou dynasty. And it may be 3 or a total of 4 videos on this page, depending. And the way that I think will help you organize your ideas and also work with our course content more efficiently, because you can link my videos, which are kind of giving an overview in some cases of deeper material that I've prepared for you further on in the module. So let me share my slides after that long introduction. Sure, I'm recording. Yes, I am. What you're looking at here is a Chinese painting, a classic Chinese landscape painting on a scroll. It reads from right to left, and we'll be looking at more of these in 2 weeks. But I've brought it in now for several reasons. One is it's here to emphasize the relationship between nature and Chinese ideas of seclusion and even immortality, and the dynamic between political instability and ways of the world versus an understanding of the natural world as a refuge. And this is a theme that, or a perspective that appears again and again in our class, and it begins really when we're looking at Taoism this week. But this painting is a fable. It illustrates a fable. It's a very common subject for paintings of this type by Tao Qin. And it depicts a fisherman's accidental discovery. Can you see the fisherman? Right here in the center. A fisherman's accidental discovery of a peaceful and bountiful farming valley, which is isolated beyond a mountain cave. And the valley's inhabitants had fled from political turmoil 6 centuries earlier, and they are unaware of the events in the outside world. Blossoming peach trees here, and remember this reads from right to left, so you start reading the scroll here, and you can see these wonderful kind of light pinkish tones behind this older, bigger tree, and really kind of sparkling or shimmering against this wonderful blue of the mountains in the background. These are the blossoming peach trees of spring, and it is this grove through which this fisherman has passed to enter into this place that's been cut off from the contemporary world and is a kind of utopia, suggestive of a land of immortality. And of course, the pigments here in this painting of azurite, which is a semi-precious stone, and malachite, another semi-precious stone, have been included with various colored inks to create a world that is otherworldly and quite suited to this subject matter. The reason, so the first reason I've brought it in is to kind of set the stage in a way for your dive into Taoism. And we'll be looking at some images of nature that are distinctly Taoist in subject, but even here where the human beings appear very tiny and dwarfed by the vast natural world, this is, even when it's not a deliberately Taoist work, reflects that perspective in Chinese visual culture, that of the human being's relationship to nature as one of being a small part of it and moving with its energies, not against it or dominating it. And for those of you who have already looked at the Taoism page, that will make a lot of sense. Now, additionally, I've chosen to bring this image in because it's one that some of you might think is kind of classically Chinese in its landscape, in particular, wonderful mountains, big valleys, and lush forests, which China is certainly that in many areas, but it's so much more. China has a very tropical southernmost portion that is parallel to the north of Vietnam and to Laos. And what we're looking at here is the Nanshan Cultural Tourism Zone. It's a large Buddhist complex, and it consists of gardens, sculptures, sea views, and different sites dedicated to Buddhist worship. One of its primary attractions is the 3-sided Kuan Yin, Goddess of Mercy statue, standing at 354 feet high. She is the tallest Kuan Yin statue in the world. So some of you don't have any idea what Kuan Yin is, but you might have seen this figure in various places in our multicultural Bay Area. Kuan Yin is a bodhisattva, and you will learn a lot more about the bodhisattva next week as we look at the development of Buddhism in China and tracing the bodhisattva between India and China. It is, Kuan Yin is a transformation or an evolution of a Buddhist bodhisattva. All bodhisattvas are Buddhist, actually, of course. And she is the same as Avalokitesvara, which is the Indian name for this bodhisattva of compassion and mercy. She is here, as I said, near the Nanshan Temple, and she has three aspects. One side faces inland China, and the other two face the South China Sea, to represent blessing and protection by the God, the Bodhisattva of mercy of China and the whole world. So let us hope that her presence does precisely what Buddhists expect it to do. One aspect depicts Kuan Yin cradling a sutra in her left hand. We'll learn more about sutras further on in this class. And in her left hand, she is also cradling, holding a string of prayer beads. And then not visible here because we're only looking at her facing one direction. She's also holding a lotus, but you can't see it from this angle. The statue took 6 years to build and was enshrined on April 24th, 2005, with the participation of 108 monks from various Buddhist groups in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and mainland China, and within Southeast Asian and Tibetan Buddhist traditions, as well as significantly the Mahayana Chinese Buddhist traditions. So note the tropical atmosphere, but also note her place is a crossroads of different manifestations or practices of Buddhism. And this was a collective effort among all three different ways of practicing Buddhism. Here is Sanya, where she is located. So you can see she's well positioned in the South China Sea here. And one of her aspects is facing right down into Southeast Asia. But China is also many other climates and regions, and I brought in a very dry kind of basic map to kind of capture this efficiently. There is arid desert, highlands, subtropical as well as tropical. We just looked at tropical, humid continental, warm summer. Those are those warm trees and that lush landscape and the kind of landscape that our peach blossom painting would be depicting. We also have semi-arid steppes, short hot summers, long cold winters with very little rain and snow. We have humid continental cool summers up here in the north, and we have subarctic. Here we're looking at a beautiful city in the far north of China. It's the Shuofeng Forest Farm in Mudajiang City in the Heilongjiang province. So this is the upper, I'll just show you. This is just a section of China here in the kind of central to northern China. Here's Mongolia, and the area highlighted is the area that we're looking at with the snow. And this particular city is located well north. The snow season at Shuofeng can last up to 7 months. And visitors, of course, go here to see these beautiful, stunning snow views that look, at least in terms of the snow, quite a lot like our Sierra Mountains at the moment. There are high mountains, dense forests, low winds, and a lot of humidity. Again, not unlike the side of the Sierra Mountains that we are on the side of, and we can travel up to quite easily. Here's our map again. China also is the Gobi Desert is in China. Part of the Gobi Desert is in China. The Gobi Desert here is in Mongolia as well as China. Here you can see the border. And it's abutting up against the highlands of the Himalaya as well. So really quite dramatic kind of contrast of land here. And the Gobi Desert, of course, it's actually not that hot, but it's extremely dry, rather like the Sahara. It's sitting in a kind of environmental phenomena where a pressure zone simply does not allow moisture to move over into the region, and there's just not rain and water to moisten the land. So it can be quite cold in the winter, but also very hot and dry. And you'll see wild camels here. I didn't bring in a picture, but there are wild camels. They're very straggly and different than the kind of camels you might think of, you know, kind of a Middle Eastern camel. I should have brought one in, but look it up. And they kind of walk along the roadside. And so then that's just a quick overview of the geography and climate of China and kind of an introduction to where our class is going. I'm going to let you go here, and now in the next video, I'm going to introduce you to Neolithic China. So I'll see you back here again very soon. Let me share.